folks. Welcome one, welcome all. Welcome to this live stream where we're going to be discussing the three new Drake albums, Iceman, Habibti, and Maid of Honor. We're going to be talking about them through the lens of Drake's career as a whole. And yeah, we're going to get started in a few minutes, but just introduce myself real quick. My name is Gabriel Bras Nevares. I am a news writer for Hot New Hip Hop. I am here with Aaron. Aaron, how you doing today, man?
I'm doing great. How you doing, bro?
Pretty good, pretty good. It's a hot day here in Puerto Rico, but we make do. We move
I
through
feel
it.
you. I feel
Uh,
you. The weather's nice today. The sun is shining. It's feeling appropriate day to be talking about Drake. To be honest with you,
yeah,
up
uh,
in Canada when the sun is shining, it feels like Drake's come with the summer. The summer hits for the world. You know.
yeah, absolutely. And it's gonna be that season. We're gonna be hearing these tracks out and about in a
Yep.
live setting. We have a lot of material to talk about, but we wanted to take a look at this conversation through just kind of like the trajectory that Drake has had over the years, and just how he has, not just dominated, but also subverted a lot of stuff as of late. And we're going to talk about a lot of the reactions and reviews to Iceman, and Habibi and Maid of Honor. So if you guys want to, drop a hello in the chat, let us know where you're listening from, shouting out the people you're with. And yeah, it's going to be a really interesting conversation. And really excited to chop it up with Aaron about this, who's written some, great work on Drake's new releases as of late. So make sure to check those reviews and, long form pieces out on Hot New Hip Hop.
Appreciate the shout out. It's been it's been great just having those chats and being able to engage with the music after such a long wait for solo projects, and especially when the expectation was just one album and we ended up getting three very distinct albums from him that feel like some of his best material in a while, or at least some of his most interesting material in a while.
Yeah, absolutely. But before getting into that, we do want to talk about Drake's past first, because we think that this is a really great opportunity to look at his past, present, and future. And Aaron, you were talking with me the other day about a comparison that you made between this new Iceman era and Summer 16, which was
Mm.
when he dropped. It was after the Meek Mill beef. Talk to me a little bit about some of those parallels that you've seen from that Summer 16 era and how you think they've influenced this current rollout, which just so happens to fall around Views' 10th anniversary.
No, for sure. I think just when you see somebody like Drake come out of a rap beef, and especially from his previous feuds in the past, whether it's Meek Mill or whether it's Pusha T, win or lose, he just comes out still a winner, still dominating, still having the charts on lock. But this time felt a little bit different because obviously with the Kendrick stuff, that came with a lot of just general pushback and narrative switching on who he is. Something that kind of felt for the first time was out of his own control. But I feel like with those two projects, Views and Scorpion, he came back with albums that they were so dominant for the summer that we kind of all the other stuff just kind of became secondary. And I think after 2 years of him just having this narrative chase him down on the biggest stages across the world, that he's finally dropping something where he's really delivering on what people kind of expected. Whether the reception was what people wanted at first, I think he came through with something that was inherently in his rap bag, along with two other projects that dived into his other bags as well. And it was like what Views was a very Toronto centric album, and it also came off the heels of If You're Reading This, which in my opinion is maybe his most Toronto centric album. And I feel like with Iceman specifically, and the rollout around it, it came back to his home grounds for not the first time in a while, but definitely in a way that felt a lot more meaningful than it has within the past 5 years. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And I think that there's a lot of, it's one thing to put the CN Tower on the Some Six Songs for You like video shoot, or actually Might have to fact check that one.
That
But anyways,
was a
um,
building in Mississauga. I think I forgot what it's called, like Coca-Cola or
yeah,
something.
yeah, that's my bad. That's my
But
bad.
the
Um,
views had a CN Tower on it, and he
yeah,
was photoshopped on it that time.
yeah, no, and this time for Iceman, he was actually like there, which was like also like really interesting to see. I think with the Summer 16 comparison, one thing you mentioned that was really interesting was just kind of like the different sides of Drake that he was able to show back then. Thinking about views specifically, you have tracks like Western Road Flows that really get into that rap bag, and then you have like really versatile collaborations, like a lot more pop rap hits. You have Hotline Bling, obviously. You have the Afro beats with One Dance, and I think that a lot of those like dance hall influences really permeate that record. And I was surprised to see, even within this similar approach for Drake, as far as like coming back from a beef and coming with a lot of material. I was really interested to see him just kind of like divide, I guess, those artistic parts of
Mhm.
himself in these three albums instead of the track list that we've gotten over the past 10 years, which have been very versatile and have had like a lot of different aspects to it. And I think that it might be, something for him to consider, especially since it's something that he's been building up to throughout his career without us even realizing it. You have an album like Honestly Nevermind that really delves into, clubbier sounds, delves into house a lot more. And, we thought that that might just kind of be a one off, but now we see that this is like a growing direction for Drake. So, what do you think are some other things that he might have done in the past that, maybe hinted towards these directions on these new albums? Whether it's the R&B centric Some Sexy Songs for You, whether it's his love of like regional and underground scenes, like what are some things that are giving you deja vu a bit?
I think even just the idea of splitting these personalities a little bit, because and maybe not with views, but with Scorpion at least, it was a double disc effort, and as a double disc effort, the first half rap heavy, the bottom half super R&B, or like trying to be more R&B. And I found that I didn't find it that effective when he dropped Scorpion. If I'm being very honest with you, I think there's something about Drake trying to like do all these different things that sometimes it kind of gets lost and feels more like a playlist than a cohesive album. But I feel like how he approached it with these albums felt a lot more organic to him, and it didn't feel like he was trying as hard or trying to like push more than he had within him. I think each, even though Iceman might be a little bit lengthy, it doesn't necessarily feel like it's as long as some of his other projects. And I feel like even with Habibti, like that to me was like a nice, relatively short listen. I think both Habibti and Maid of Honor both under an hour long, and like me personally, that's kind of what I've wanted for Drake from for a long time. Is I wanted an album that didn't take like an hour and a half to get through. You know what I mean? I think he managed to get straight to the point with those two surprise albums. I think Iceman a little bit long, sure, but he had things to get off his chest. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And there's also like a lot of just like variety on Iceman. Even within the hip hop centric sounds, there is a lot of like variety there. For those of you in the chat, let us know, what are some things about that Summer 16 run and about these Scorpions. Also, another good comparison point that you guys have been loving on these new three albums. And I wanted to go back real quick to, you mentioned how he had a lot to get off his chest, right?
Mm,
And you could argue the same for Views and for Scorpion in terms of him responding to recent beefs that had happened. Meek Mill in the case of Views, Pusha T in the case of Scorpion, and we have a win and a loss to kind of compare this Iceman rollout to. And I think in the case of Views, it was so summarized by back to back that it didn't really feel like he had to do a lot with Views to really prove himself. I think you mentioned this in your like retrospective on Views that you published recently, that it feels like he wasn't as concerned with being the best rapper or the biggest rapper at a certain point. Then he really switched to just like artistry in general and reaching across these aisles. And in the case of Scorpion, that same approach, instead of being like a new step for him, it becomes a weapon for him to use. Story about it on drops. Soon afterwards, we're all, spinning nice for what endlessly,
mm,
endlessly in my feelings, God's plan. And even though a lot of the critical conversations around Drake remain the same, I think that it's still, interesting to see now that Iceman represents sort of like the fullest extent of that weapon, of using
Mm.
his success in this beef context, but also, doing the views thing as well. He's offering these very versatile sounds, and feeding his fans with a lot. Um, do you think that do you think that maybe things would have gone differently if for an album like Scorpion, if he had emerged victorious in that Pusha T beef? Because I think that so much of Iceman deals with that dichotomy of like you feel at the top, but you lost, and so I'm interested to hear your thoughts on just kind of like where that mentality might come from.
I mean, I've always had this theory, and maybe it's a little bit of a hot take, but I've always felt like Meek Mill, for whatever his reason of going off on Drake that one night on Twitter, kind of proved effective. Because like, and I think that's been the common thread with everybody's beef with Drake has been like, you're a pop star, you're not a rapper. You're a pop star, you're not a rapper. Even with like Pusha, even with Kendrick, these always get weaponized against him. But I think in the case of Meek, by the time he did that, Drake had no other choice but to be the biggest pop star in the world. So if you're not going to let him be the greatest rapper alive, and I think, quite frankly, he did stop chasing that greatest rapper alive title for a bit at least by that point when the ghostwriting things came out. But he still leaned into being the biggest pop star. And with by the time Scorpion came out, you couldn't really stop the motion that he already had because the anticipation was already so high. The beef with Pusha T, I feel like only just added fuel to the fire that he already had. I think like maybe the only misstep within that time was dropping "I'm Upset" and like trying to sidestep everything as like, hey, we got this Degrassi reunion going on. But outside of that, it was like Drake had the year on lock with God's Plan that year. Like I think in a lot of ways we forget how big that song was for when it came out, and it was like absolutely inescapable. So I feel like in both of those cases with Meek and with Pusha, he had no other and he had nothing else to lean on except for being the biggest pop star. And then I think with the Kendrick stuff, that's when it was like I really can't just rest on being the biggest pop star alive. You know what I mean? Like I think Kendrick really kind of forced him to be not Kendrick necessarily, but everything that kind of went on within that beef kind of forced him to be like, I could still rap when I need to rap, and I could still defend myself lyrically. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. Like he was always going to have that bag, and even if he's not like chasing that best rapper thing necessarily, I think it's something that he's always going to go back to, and he feels comfortable
Mm,
returning to with the same energy and that same sort of like confidence and that same braggadocio. But I think that a lot of that goodwill and a lot of the the ability for him to become the biggest pop star that you were talking about, I think that just it goes to show just kind of like how much he's been able to grow within the industry, whether it's like the collaborations with Apple Music, like these big campaigns with Spotify. And his like other business endeavors, like his
mm,
sports team ownership, his Raptors ambassadorship for Toronto. There's just so much stuff that he has really invested in, not just literally, but like figuratively in terms of wanting to carve out a space for himself commercially no matter what. And I think that we're going to get into this a little bit more when we talk about the UMG label
mm,
discussion that's been happening with Iceman. But I think you make a great point as far as like he built all of this momentum within these systems, even with his issues and with his struggles as far as like navigating it. And it's now put him in this position where he can start to maybe divest from one thing here, one thing there, but his reach and his image doesn't really change. Like people
mm,
don't stop talking about Drake and promoting Drake because he's independent as far as like the consumers.
mm.
Um, how do you think that sort of like manifested on Iceman, which is like more outwardly confrontational in terms of these themes, but is clearly still, displaying a lot of dominance?
I think like at the end of the day, Iceman was really like the test of everything for Drake and the empire he built. Because even with some sexy songs for you, that was like an explicitly R&B album, and in a lot of ways, it kind of feels like an afterthought to a lot of things within the past 2 years, and Drake trying to like not necessarily reshape his image, but trying to get back into good favors with the same audience that kind of rejected him after the beef. You know what I mean? So I think just for Drake, on a business level, I think he's kind of untouchable at this point, and I think Iceman just goes to show that like, regardless of what's said about him, he's going to continue to be the guy. Like he's always showed the business acumen. I think when we see all these collaborations that OVO does, and like I think we forget how deep that bag of like OVO collaborations is, like on a
Yeah.
corporate level, right? Like he could do stuff with McDonald's, he could do stuff with Canada Goose, and all of these things still make sense within the Drake brand. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I think Iceman just ultimately kind of shows that he's untouchable in that regard. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because I think that, once you gain this reputation, once you gain this image, and when so much of your music and your artistry and your brand is built on that, even if it is a lot of it going back to his roots, I think that there's really, no other way it could have gone right now. And one thing, another thing that I think represents how untouchable he is the hate and criticism that he's been dealing with, throughout his entire career. We're not talking about the discussion of like Iceman now yet, but from the start, it was people saying that he was soft and he was corny and he was making music for women. And that was one of the things that really like made him captivating and super influential and groundbreaking as a rapper, as far as like putting that at that commercial level. Then it was the ghostwriting thing. Then there's, all these other like, gossipy sort of like narratives about him as far as like his IRL stuff,
Mm-hmm.
the quality of the music. Like there's just been so much Drake criticism throughout the years, that I think it's also it's kind of made the current discourse around him a bit more confusing to parse through, because some people talk about it as if it's like a new occurrence, when honestly like people have been hating on him for all these reasons and more for like a long time. And I wanted to ask you, like, do you think that there's maybe a different energy that he had here when responding to not necessarily the industry stuff, but just like negative criticism of him from consumer bases? Do you think there's anything different in terms of like how he has responded to that on Iceman in comparison to things that he has, said in the past, and sort of like dismissals he's done in the past?
I think just musically, it's really like the challenge for Drake musically to deliver something that people enjoy outside of his core fan base. Because I think, honestly, by this point, we know that Drake's fan base, and it's a big fan base, they're going to love whatever he does. Like, no matter what he does, they're going to love it and they're going to consume it and they're going to contribute to the like high numbers that he puts up. But I think his challenge here was to actually listen to his critics and appease all the criticism that he's had towards him, actually address it in not just like a lyrical form, but like actually just delivering the music itself. And I think he, quite frankly, did a great job with just delivering it on that front. And I think, I don't know, maybe he needs to listen to his haters a little bit more, to be honest with you. Like, if we're gonna be getting like quality like this, I think he needs to be like hearing what people who are just general naysayers are on. You know?
Yeah, for sure. Because he's proven that he can respond to them and be like, okay, I'll do exactly what you want me to do. Now what? I'm just going to move on to something else. Shout out to FJCG444, who summed this up pretty well. 20v1 since day one. And I think that's kind of been a bit of a theme throughout Drake's career. And it's part of like the way that he has marketed himself and presented himself as an artist, like not just an underdog, but also like the chosen one, and just like the guy on top. So that dichotomy is always something that he's worked with. Speaking of which, let us know in the chat whether you guys are huge Drake fans, or you're watching this to see us dunk on him or glaze him, or whatever. Because I think it's really interesting to see just kind of like how all this discourse has shifted. And I liked what you said about him maybe like listening to them more, because I think it also, we know that he is online and he engages with these things, and we know he listens. And it's not like, it's not up to us to demand a response, or anything like that. But I think it does showcase that, the way in which he's engaging with these new things, I think has kind of shifted a little bit over time as well, as far as like what he's responding to, what he's showing love to online, and things like that. And I think that actually translates pretty well into what's going on right now. If it's going on, actually, before we get onto that, we have a question from Instagram. Is it confirmed he's independent now From what we understand, not yet. Some reports have, suggested that it is true, but there hasn't really been any confirmation from, the OVO team or from UMG or something like that. I know one of the New York Times Popcast guys said that he talked to people on both sides, and it's kind of complicated, but we'll get into it a little bit later, because we were talking about the critical reception, and now we want to shift gears a little bit to the critical reception happening now, the reviews, reactions, discussions, debates, everything going on around this new trilogy. I wanted to ask you, Aaron, what do you think are some of the most like surprising or notable reactions and discussions you've seen from the fan base and from media about these new albums?
I mean, I think one of the more interesting things is that like a lot of like historical Drake haters, I don't want to call them historical haters, but like people who've just been historically critical of him, have somehow found a way to appreciate him, and I think one of that has to do with like a relatively long absence. Even though he's still been putting out music, it just hasn't been like, to the scale that most Drake music is.
Mhm.
And I think because of that, like we're seeing a lot more people be like, oh, like I think I saw something from Fader where they were talking about like whether you like him or not, like Drake is still an entertainer, and the whole Iceman rollout for whatever, however you felt about it was like you couldn't stop staring at it. I think like even if we look back to views for a quick second, like when he did that CN Tower thing on for the cover, everybody was all the corporations were doing it. And when he did the Iceman, the ice installation, it's the same thing. So I think he forced people to engage with his music in like a way where they couldn't deny it. People could like hate it, they could not like it, or they could love it. But one way or another, everybody has been sitting around trying to figure out what's Drake gonna do next. What's Drake gonna do when his back is against the wall, right? And
Mhm.
I think I think for a lot of people, and myself included, I didn't have high expectations. Like when I started, I really didn't even really want to watch the Iceman stream to begin with.
Mhm.
But when I did start tuning into it, I was like, the music is actually something that I appreciate from Drake. And it's been a while where I could listen to consecutive Drake songs in sequence and be like, wow, I'm not going to skip this. I want to hear what else he has up his sleeve next. For yourself, what were some of the I guess some of the criticisms and some of the expectations you heard beforehand, and how did you see those, whether they shifted or stayed after the albums were released?
Yeah, for sure. So, like most people, I talking about Drake is very hard for me because every time there's something positive, I feel like there's this wave of negative things that just kind of like rush into the mind. And whenever I say something negative, it's the opposite. And
Nice.
finding that balance is always kind of weird because you get put into the stan and hater categories. But some of the most surprising things that I saw as far as like the reactions to these new albums were that not only is it like so evidently clear how the fan base is split depending on like what type of music you consume, but it's also just kind of like I saw a lot of people that maybe were more into Drake's pop stuff than his rap stuff be like, oh, Iceman's actually really fun, it's really solid, like Scary Mercury 3899 put right here. Exactly, low expectations but pleasantly surprised that he delivered. I think that's a lot of, that's what a lot of people were saying about this album that might have been like, Drake haters in the past or something like that. And I think one of the key things to note as well is how these reactions are kind of like talking about his personality and his persona and like what emotional state he's portraying in his music. Like I saw, I think it was when Pitchfork gave Cheetah Print like best new track. I think it's like they were saying something about how goofy it sounds and like that is part of what makes it good. So I think it's also a lot of people that, like you were saying, like Drake is an entertainer, and some people are just like pleasantly entertained by something that maybe they might not like on like a quality level, but you got to talk about it. You have to react to it. It's a, if you're a streamer or a YouTube reactor or something like that, like that's gold, you know? And I think it would be disingenuous, I think, for a lot of people to just kind of like say that there's nothing of worth on these albums because it feels like he really hit like all of the options above as far as like
Mhm.
what what people were expecting from him. Um, but yeah, I think it's a lot more of like a social thing as far as like why you like this side of Drake, and what does it remind you of, and I think people are kind of like sectioning themselves off a little bit for it, which I think is really interesting. But there's another thing, a lot of people, regardless of the music, they have their criticism because of the context of the beef.
Mm.
And arguably the biggest part of that, and the biggest, sort of like contributor to that, is the UMG lawsuit that is going on right now. This is a really sort of like divisive topic among a lot of fans. So if y'all want to start some debates, hit us up in the chat. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Um, do you think that specifically on Iceman, because Habibti and Maid of Honor don't really like touch on this at all,
Mhm.
but specifically on Iceman, did you find regardless of what you thought of the musical quality, did you find the content on it about the not just like the lawsuit but the whole thing, like did you find it to bog down or like improve your experience? Like what was
Like
that?
in terms of him addressing like the entire situation that led up to this album. Honestly, it was just kind of expected. I think that was kind of one of the better parts about like I think that was one of the better parts about this whole release because like he gave us one album where he's just addressing everything, and then I did not have to hear about it again for the other two albums. So
Mm,
like with I kind of expected him to just say what he needed to say, and he obviously had things that have been weighing on his chest for like 2 years at this point, and I think it was just expected that he'd be addressing it. I think that every single song would kind of hone into this energy. Not really, but I'm not necessarily mad at it either because again, like Drake, when his back is against the wall, he knows how to deliver, and I think with the stakes and everybody piling onto him, um, I know it kind of gets redundant at certain points, and it did feel a little bit redundant at times. But like the more I listen to it, the funnier it is to me, to be honest with you, because like even people that are just like tangentially involved with the beef who didn't like have like any real involvement at all. Um, yeah, I like any nobody that had like some people that just didn't really like involve themselves or just catching strays. And quite frankly, I just found it like just really funny. What
yeah.
about you? Did you expect it to be this focused on the beef, or did you think it was going to be something that he wasn't really going to address to the same extent?
I think I agree that it's definitely expected. Even though we got a lot of leaks beforehand and stuff like that, and so much beef to look into. Like we just got an Instagram question: does Drake beef with Wiz? I don't think so. But I
With
guess.
Wiz Khalifa or Wiz Kid?
Oh, that's a good question. Not sure. We might get a clarification, but
Yeah,
I don't think so. But at the same time, it's also kind of like it wouldn't be super surprising. But back to your question. I think that for me, what was most surprising to me was not just that it was like pretty much every single song was alluding to something either with UMG or Kendrick specifically or the people that turned on him or whatever. What surprised me the most was just how angry he continued to sound. I think that there have been a lot of things in recent years that have proven to him that he can still, that he was not really like truly affected by this. And I don't think anybody realistically expected, Kendrick to win and Drake to fall off the face of the earth. Like that's just super unrealistic. But I guess I would have. I guess I was surprised that it was a little bit more. It sounded a little bit more hurt, and it sounded a little bit more like angry and vindictive than like celebratory and triumphant. And it definitely makes for some really compelling moments on the album. But I think it's also something where with all of these things in mind, and you're still going at Kendrick, and you're still referencing some of these things. Um, Scary Mercury pointed it out again. He said he talks about most of the beef specifically on the Make Them songs, and he said what he needed to say. The arrogance and not submitting the album to the Grammys. I'm a fan, and I think that's kind of like the energy that he came through with on most of the album. But I think with the stuff he's saying with the UMG lawsuit in mind, I think it's just for as a fan, too much of a disconnect when you're trying to think about like the songs a little bit deeper. And it's not to discredit each of them individually, but it's just like, am I really going, like, how seriously can I take this content when I know that he's appealing a dismissed defamation
Mm,
lawsuit in regards to these disses that are alluding to these things that are also like serious and you know, like some real life stuff. And that's also like a consequence of, I think, him showing off so many sides of him, is that the sides start to contradict each other at a certain
mm,
point, and it makes the listening experience a little bit more, I guess, I don't want to say sparse, but it makes the listening experience a little bit more like you're kind of testing yourself and constantly
mm,
like thinking about it as like where the line is drawn. I don't think it has much to do with the music at face value, but as far as like the long term appeal of it, I think that that's just kind of like something to take note of. And another like aspect of it that I thought kind of represented that dichotomy was the Future feature on Ran to
mm.
Atlanta with Molly Santana, who is the new Hannah Montana for sure. Love that feature.
For
Um,
sure.
referencing the, you know, referencing Not Like Us and all that. What did you think about Drake and Future's reunion? A lot of people said, and they themselves said, that they're backed by popular demand, and a lot of people are still thinking about how like that started this whole thing off. So, what do you got to say about that?
I think that like that speaks exactly to the contradiction you were speaking about because in my opinion, like you can be mad at everybody, but if you're not mad at the guy who like spearheaded this whole thing and like benefited the most from basically just like getting you putting you on the putting the target on your back and then letting Kendrick do what he did on like that and then like a year later you guys are like back to being buddy buddy. For me, it's like if that could happen, then it could happen with anybody else that you're talking about. Like like he got beef with LeBron for dancing to the song, and that's fair. I think LeBron was maybe doing the most with dancing to the song, but at the same time, it's like if Future could be back on good terms with you, I think like he could get back on good terms with everybody else. But at the same time, I do think like in part maybe proves that third verse of shout out to Tone Bricks. But I think I don't know. I think Future being on the album, I could have done without it. I do like the song, but I'm like if the whole point of the album is just to like get your get back, linking up with the guy that started it all kind of like it kind of makes the point a little bit redundant to me. It still
Yeah.
makes great music, you know what I mean? But I do think what I was saying before, it does kind of feel like the whole third verse of Kendrick's Not Like Us kind of like make a little bit more sense. Like, not saying he had to run to Atlanta, but you're still making music with Future, and if it's backed by popular demand, we know that there's a mutual benefit on both for both parties to collaborate together. You know?
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And I think it's you know, and I don't want to shout out to to Tone Brex who said Future better not ever do that again. But I think it's also just kind of a missed opportunity. Like it's not like I was expecting Future and Drake to trade a couple of verses about, you know, burying the hatchet, but I think just some, you know, something to speak on it further that is more than Future getting on Twitter, because he doesn't really say anything in the verses that specifically kind of like alludes to that. Drake, you know, references the whole thing, but I just feel like it's kind of a missed opportunity to actually make like a really significant moment for the two. Like these are collaborators that have been like this
Mm,
since 2015, if not earlier. And I
for
think that it
sure.
could have been like one of the most unique songs in like hip hop collaborative history at this scale, as far as like talking about falling
Yeah.
out and getting back together. Like that would have been insane. That would have been insane. And I think it's just like what you were saying about like a lot of the beef stuff, that it's about a lot of people like random. Like we got an Instagram question like, who is Janice? And Janice, according to the internet, might be either Baby Keem's mom or a UMG employee. And it's like, okay, I know you referenced Keem. If it is, you know, Keem's mom, like I know you referenced, you know, Keem in Family Matters, but like, are we going this route? Like all of us, like I don't know. It's one of those things where I think it also makes some of the content, even though I think that his writing, his rapping itself is like awesome on Iceman. Like I think it's some of his best that he's done in years and years and years. If not ever, honestly, like throughout his whole career, I think as far as like schemes and just like his attention to detail, it's great. But again, like it's resting on this cognitive dissonance for a lot of people. But it wasn't, you know, I guess with the other discussions about the features have been more about like, which by the way, let us know what have been some of your favorite features on these albums. You know, Sexy Red gets a lot of discourse because people just don't like her for whatever reason,
Mm.
and they, you know, get super serious over just like very fun songs. At the end of the day, it's not like I didn't really like her nor personally, but Cheetah Print, you know, despite the Cha Cha Slide part, like it's a fun track. Like, and I
No,
think it's interesting, especially to and I'd love to get your take on this. Like in comparison to people talking about this collab with Future, like it kind of makes like the discussion around other features like Sexy Red ring a little bit differently because it feels like some people want him to really stick to that corner, and others are like, make the music you want to make. You know.
mm. I mean, I don't know. The Sexy Red, I'm not the biggest Sexy Red fan, to be quite honest with you. I have no like real problems with her or anything like that. I just like she's not somebody that I'm like listening to regularly on my downtime. But I feel like she's like benefited out of most artists from the Drake relationship. She's been out for only a couple years now. I think she has at least three three or four collaborations with Drake. She was on for All the Dogs. Drake did the BBL Drizzy verse on her album, You My Everything, and then she gets two features on this one. I think I
Mhm.
heard Joe Budden say something about like Drake's involvement with Gamma. I don't know how true it is, but I know the Sexy Red connection to Gamma. Maybe that's something there that explains all of this. Um, Personally, I just like with that particular feature on both of those songs. To be honest with you, could have really done without it. But like as you said, they're really fun. Like the Cha Cha Slide is like Flip was mad fun, and like for an album like that veers very far away from both Sexy Red's bag and Drake's like usual bag. I think it worked for what it was.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, and especially in the context of that album. Before we get into like the future stuff and talking about like what is going to be next for Drake, I wanted to just quickly ask you, because this, at least to me, as a complete outsider, like it feels like throughout the episode 4 live stream, the rollout, a lot of the things we're doing on social media, it seems like he's feels closer to not just like Toronto, but just like his circle
Mm.
a little bit more. We were talking a little bit earlier about like views and some sexy songs for you also having that connection. What do you think about that sort of like Toronto love shown on Iceman?
I mean, I feel like he couldn't. Where else would he be doing things like this right now? Like in the circumstances of everything, and I think like it worked out really well, from my understanding. 40's in it, Oliver's around, and I feel like linking up with all of his original tastemakers and all the original people and just showing love to the city was like it really grounded this album as the experience that it was. You know what I mean? And I think obviously the mayor of Toronto agrees.
No, absolutely. Yeah, shout out Crolivia. And now that you said that about the just like OVO, I think that closeness also brings up a lot of questions about Drake's future. Like, where is
Mhm.
he gonna go? Because I think that now that he feels a lot more like tight within that circle, like there's a lot of questions about what's gonna be next. What's gonna be next for OVO as a whole. So we're gonna talk about like the future of Drake after this trilogy. I think that the biggest thing to mention. If you folks want to continue to talk about the albums, give us your takes, give us your reactions, questions, drop them in the chat. We will, you know, continue to bounce back and forth. But as far as the future stuff, I think the biggest question, which we got in chat earlier, was about the UMG contract rumors. So if you're not aware, people have been speculating that these 3 albums fulfill his contract with UMG and that he may now seek another home or the more likely option, which is go independent. There have been talks about, you know, him having like $2 billion deals on the table, hence he's on the table with 21 Savage. And there are some people also saying that he might try to finesse UMG for more, you know, in a contract renewal or stuff like that. Um, Aaron, do you think that this will? Do you think that the contract? How important do you think the contract question is? Because I think some people talk about it as just kind of like it being a thing. Shout out to Saint Muima, who said his album was 1 out of 10. I wouldn't give it that harsh of a score, but you know,
Which
to each their own.
album is my question?
That's a great.
Let us
That's
know. Let
another
us
point.
know.
Yeah, that's another great point. But yeah, how important do you think this UMG contract is as far as like um what is going to come next? Because I've also seen some people like talk about it as just kind of like, oh, like it's just like a business move, like whatever. Like how significant do you think it will be if it's happen?
I really don't know. Like, I can't really predict what it is because I think sometimes we put a little, and just like the general discourse, there's like this, like we put a lot more. Um, I don't know. We add a little bit more weight to it, and I think one way or another, Drake's probably leaving with a bag. I've heard some of this like private equity talk. Some people are saying like 1 billion. Some people are saying 5 billion. I think all of that's like just insane. I think the numbers they're throwing around are insane. But I think it goes back to what you're talking about in terms of the empire he built, because it's not just Drake the music; it's Drake the brand, and I think that's far more valuable to a record label or to whoever wants to do a deal with him than just the music itself. The music itself is always gonna it's gonna sell. It's always gonna do numbers. But I think what it might do, I think maybe if I'm being hopeful, Drake going independent might lead the way for other artists to do the same. I think we've been seeing a lot of different artists do this like direct to consumer thing, and I think that's been great. I think we're seeing a lot more artists try and figure out ways to engage with their audiences um, in like a direct way without having the record labels involved. And I think we're kind of in an era, I think, right now where like a lot of people realize that like what the record label can do for them, at least early on in their career, they could probably do for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So I think like with Drake doing this deal, and whatever the deal ends up being, it'll be way more beneficial to Drake than it is to anybody else. I don't think like Drake doing like him leaving UMG will probably have an impact within their building,
Mm-hmm.
especially with the amount of money he's bringing in. But I
Yeah.
think in general, we're kind of already at a point where like a lot of the do-it-yourself approach has proven to be really effective for artists within the past like 10, 15 years. You know what I mean? So like I think with Drake uh, doing a big deal, whether he manages to get a couple billion out of UMG or not, I don't think that's going to really change much for him more than it will for the label. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. And he talked on For All the Dogs about keeping the lights on at UMG. So I think it
Um,
will be more impactful. Like I don't think it wouldn't impact like his image as much.
mm,
Shout out to Bumpy G Jackson, who said Kendrick needs to get off Drake nuts. Drake is the best artist in the game, and 1 billion Kendrick could never. Scary Mercury back. I think he would look like a fool to sign again with UMG, even if he earns up making more money or ends up making more money. $100 trillion. It will make everything he said on Iceman pointless. That's another thing as well that some people have been saying as far as like, people have been theorizing about whether or not Kendrick is going to do something, which is a whole other topic unto itself, which doesn't really have a lot
mm.
of basis right now. So he seems comfortable there. Shout out Julius Mosley, who said for real, and Scary Mercury again after suing UMG. That line he said about rather dying than submitting is dead. Like you're not standing on business. See, done some more cognitive dissonance stuff we're talking about. And shout out to the one Obriel who said, I think Drake wants to be independent. I agree. I think he definitely wants to be independent. I think that's like his goal. If it is, if yeah, I don't think he's gonna go to like Sony or whatever. I think he's gonna
Mm.
chase that. I do kind of disagree with your point about inspiring other artists to do the same because I think that Drake is one of the very, very few artists that would not be impacted if they left like a major record deal. Kind of the same with Kanye, right? Like even though his
Mm.
numbers went down and stuff like that, but like Kanye West is Kanye West, Drake is Drake, and I think that the more, at least for me, like the more interesting possibility is whether or not he is going to bring other artists in, whether or not he's going to get people to leave majors, people like Sexy Red, people like Yeet, people like I don't know, Fake Mink, Low Shimmy, Stun of Sandy, like the people he's putting on, maybe he does convince more people to be like, hey, I'll try to give you a deal. Come over here, come to OVO Sound, which is now fully independent, running distribution, like all these things. I think that part of the reason why the contract situation is still unclear is probably because he's still might be trying to figure out like ownership of his earlier catalog. Because I've seen some people say that he owns his masters. I've seen some people say he doesn't, and they're going to stick with UMG. So I imagine, and he's always kind of like talked about that a lot in his throughout his career. So I think that's also going to be something like really important for him is that ownership question.
Mm,
But again, he's just in a really like unique position like right now, and I think that it's part of the narrative is that you're going to have all this power and all these resources, but you are going to portray yourself as somebody that is being scorned, that is being bogged down and stuff like that. And not saying that like all of those theories are
mm,
completely bull, but I think it's something that he is going to have to like deal with and handle, and he's going to have to think of like, do I want to compromise potential artists that I want to sign? Is this like fully independent where I'm gonna care about my OVO roster that I already have? So I don't know. I think it's gonna be a really interesting uh, outcome, and I think but I'm not. I don't. I think it's gonna be an interesting outcome like historically. I don't know how much he's gonna do with it, as far as in the sense of getting more artists out of that. I think he says something about leading the revolution
mm,
on. I think it's not like pay. But I just don't know what that is gonna look like, and I don't know just like how legitimately hard he's gonna go. Like is he going to try to fix a lot of capitalism issues in terms of like the music industry and stuff like that, or is he just gonna focus on his bag? Because it's also painting that sort of narrative, like it gets people to consider those questions. And I think it might be something that he's gonna get criticism for it anyway, but I think it's something that people will legitimately have an issue with if he goes independent. People are then gonna police like, what do you do with that independence? Kind of similar to how they have been policing Kendrick, as far as like, okay, well, you have the crown, what are
mm.
you gonna do with it? But yeah, I don't know. You told me what you
I
yeah.
just I don't know. I don't want to sound like a hater, but at the same time, like we kind of need to look at his track record when it comes to OVO Sound. I like a lot of the artists on OVO Sound. I think a lot of them are great. But I think a lot of them just haven't been able to get their shine in the way that, a lot of people would have expected. I think like someone like Party Next Door specifically, for as talented as he is and for as many hit records as he's wrote in his career, I don't think he's ever had the opportunity to really shine in the way he has. Whether that's something he wants or not, that's a whole different topic. But um, I unfortunately don't have a lot of faith in Drake being able to platform different artists and turning them into the type of star that he is. You know what I mean? Or at least uplifting them outside of just giving them a feature or posting their song and saying that he likes their music. Um, so I think like with Drake going an independent route and like maybe trying to weasel a new path. I don't want to say weasel, but like carve a new path or whatever for artists. I don't know if I have much faith in him doing that for others more so than just himself. You know what I mean?
Yeah, the track. What you're saying about the track record definitely checks out, and all those relationships are much more complex than we
Mm,
can glean from just like online discussion and stuff like that. But I do think it's gonna be it's gonna be another point of like criticism where Drake fans might be like, why are you harping this on him? Like, why is he the only one? Like, yada yada. Shout out to Scary Mercury again. He said, I think that Drake is coming for Jay-Z's current position in hip hop. He wants to outsell him musically. If he hasn't already, I don't know. And be the better businessman. He wants it all. Well, he's probably going to break the most number one albums record of Jay-Z's in just a couple days. Um, Shout out to Saint Mima as well. Said make us wait, and it was all for dissing. Which I kind of understand. You know, like I think that the negative energy, it's my issue with it is not like the negative energy, at least like me personally. It's
Mm,
more just kind of like how that energy is framed and how it was talked about from like song to song. I almost kind of
mm,
wish he went more specific topically as far as like his beef targets throughout tracks.
mm.
But anyway, I do agree that he is definitely people really seek that Jay-Z type position in hip hop, and it's something that Kendrick has definitely hinted at as well, just to make that quick comparison. And every artist, like
Mm.
that's just kind of like a formula, not a formula, but like that is the path to follow for a lot of
The
people.
blueprint.
I wanted to ask you specifically, because I think that this new trilogy structure is something I actually kind of like for Drake. I think if he continues to do this, maybe not all in like the same week, but like within a similar period of time, I think that it would, show that he's focusing more on like the album experience individually. Um, but we've kind of alluded to this a little bit before, but do you think that for whatever Drake does next, like, do you think he's still gonna have this negative energy, or do you think this is gonna be his final word as far as like alluding to this specific betrayal, saga?
Nah, definitely not. I think Drake is so petty. Like that's one of the things I find so funny about him as just like a an entity, like a celebrity. He's just like mad petty all the time, and
Mm,
I like even the fact that like he's still taking shots at Pharrell. And I honestly, to this day, I don't really know what Pharrell did except for like produce beats for Pusha T. Like it's one of those things where it's like Drake's just forever. He needs someone to just like poke at one way or another. I think, and I think just the way this whole thing, uh, like kind of went down. Like I, I'm glad that he kind of got all of it off on one album, but I don't expect him to never revisit these topics in the future. You know what I mean?
yeah, for sure. And he's had this chip on his shoulder for over 15 years, so I think he's always going to have some sort of like, no friends in the industry. And before that, it was like the timestamp tracks, like just so much stuff. So I agree that I don't think he's going to, stop having sort of like that sort of confrontational like energy to his music. But I do think it might manifest differently,
Mm,
as far as maybe he does. I don't know, because I think it's going to be a lot of like subliminals as well. Like that's just kind of like his bread and butter.
mm.
Um, so before we're almost going to wrap up here, but I wanted to ask you, like, what do you think? With these three albums in mind, with this contract in mind, the lawsuit, everything, like, what do you think Drake is gonna focus on next? Like, what do you think is gonna be his goal now that he's kind of like, he had this moment, he built up this moment, and what's next for him?
Honestly, I'm not entirely sure. That's something I've been kind of thinking about, but also trying not to think about because I'm like, we're so fresh into this album. It's only been a week, and the amount of discourse has been overwhelming just on these three albums alone. But I think like musically, I hope he keeps doing something similar to this, where like he releases projects and they all sound focused. Like I like the cohesion, and I really do think they it all pays off for him in ways that it didn't on previous projects, where he's trying to do all these different things at once. Maybe on like honestly, never mind. Not really like an album I revisit all that much, but I do think like now that it's a reference point in his career, it's cool to see him kind of dip in and out of hip hop and dabble into other genres and like try his hand with other sounds. And I hope that's something he does a bit more effectively in the future as well. You know?
Yeah, for sure. I think for me, I just kind of hope he, and this is something we're not really gonna ever see, but I just hope he focuses on his people,
Mm,
because I think that for as much as Drake's persona is so large, I think at the end of the day he doesn't really care about all that stuff that much. I think he's getting his work done, he's getting his money for his people and his circle, and I think that's going to be like, what's he's going to champion the most.
mm.
So with that being said, we are going to wrap up in a few minutes, but Aaron, I wanted to thank you so much for having this Drake discussion with me.
Nah,
It was
thank you,
a
man.
pleasure. Yeah, man. Yeah, and thank you to everybody in the chat as well for tuning in. Thanks to everybody on YouTube, on Instagram. Please make sure to check out some of our recent reviews, content about these new albums, where we go a little bit more. Well, Aaron and Erica go a little bit more in depth about the music and everything that has been, the conversations that have been happening around Drake and these reactions. And yeah, we're anticipating what's going to be next, but also, as we talked about at the top of this, it is the summer, so now after this we might not have to thank you, Scary Mercury, thank you.
Big up,
um,
Scary Mercury.
we might it's a summer now, so after this we're going to just enjoy the music, let it rest, and we'll see what happens from here. We'll see what happens with the tour as
Mm,
well.
for
That'll be pretty
sure, for sure.
interesting. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, thank y'all so much. Really appreciate it. Aaron, again, hope you're doing well. Hope you have an amazing day.
You too,
Um,
man. I really appreciate doing this with you, and I think we're gonna try and do this at least once a month. This has been fun, and I think for all the readers and all the viewers with Hot New Hip Hop, it's something we like to do and touch base with you guys, hear what you guys have to say about new music and everything going on in the culture right now. You know.
yeah, absolutely. Looking forward to more of these live sessions, discussions, all that. Peace to Francisco Jose, FJCG. Shout out my boy. And yeah, take care, everybody. Have a good one.
We'll see you guys soon.
See y'all soon indeed.